everybody, it's Tactard Ted. It is Friday, the 2nd day of August, 2024. And you may be saying to yourself, well, hell, Ted, I haven't heard anything from you lately. Of course you haven't, because I've been busy working and I've been busy traveling. And my traveling actually has something to do with what I have to talk about today. I want to talk a little bit about the shit show of the 2024 Paris Olympics. Now, the Paris Olympics right now and everything that's going on and how our media and our social media are taking care of hiding all the bullshit is just so fucking ridiculous. This is a direct page from 1984 because we're going to change the perception, we're going to change the reality, and nothing's going to be real. And I'll give you a couple of good examples. Now, for those of you who are aware, during the opening ceremony, there was a portion of the opening ceremony that mocked the Last Supper. And I'm a free speech kind of guy. You have the right to mock Christianity. 100% you have the right to mock Christianity. You have the right to mock Islam. You have a right to mock whatever you want, whether it's in good taste or bad taste, because that's free speech. Here's where the problem is. Apparently, it all got changed around to, oh, no. This wasn't about Christianity. This was about some sort of feast of Dionysus. Those of you who understand who Dionysus is from Greek mythology, you can see where that might come into play. Here's my problem with that. The lady at the center of the picture with the halo-like crown, very, very large, angry, alternate lifestyle lady, had posted out and tweeted about how she was so glad she could mock Christianity. And then after she found out a bunch of people disagreed, her post disappeared from social media. So my problem isn't that you've decided to mock Christianity. My problem is you mock Christianity, and when you realize there was a consequence for your free speech, that other people used their free speech to basically say, hey, I think you're fucked up and here's why, you immediately shrank like a coward and removed your post. I really have a problem with hypocrisy. If you're going to do something, and it was smart enough for you to do, you need to stand with it. You need to stand with it, you need to accept responsibility, and you need to call it out for what it is. Don't simply because everybody's pissed off at you, change the fucking idea of what you're doing. It wasn't mocking Christianity. Yes, it was. You admitted that it was mocking Christianity. You were proud of the fact until you suddenly understood the rest of the world is not Paris. The rest of the world isn't Paris, because I will tell you, I spent the first 2 weeks of June in France. I spent 1 week up around Normandy, and then Normandy and to the west, and then 1 week in Paris. I will tell you, the folks up around Normandy and elsewhere do not think that Paris represents them. They think the people in Paris are nuts. They think Paris is a crime-infested shithole. They're not so far from wrong. As we've seen with swimming competitions, that stuff can be very easily memory hold. We're going to take it down, we're going to get rid of it. And there's one last thing I have to say before we move on to the swimming is, let's go back to the Feast of Dionysus / slam of the Last Supper. There's a couple of stills out there that exist on the internet of one of the gentlemen that took part in this with an appendage hanging out of his shorts. And everybody jumped on and immediately said, oh, that's not any of his equipment. No, not his testicles or his penis. And so to test this theory, I posted that image on Facebook, drawing attention to it, and I was automatically dinged with a 5 or 6 day ban from using any of the groups because it was deemed nudity. So I can tell you what, that wasn't his finger sticking out of his shorts. That wasn't a bag of something sticking out of his shorts. That was flesh of his genitals fucking hanging out of the trousers. But if you didn't see it, and they're not going to allow it posted, then how do you know it happens? This is 1984-esque shit. We are going to simply remove the facts that anything happened. Now that moves us on to the swimming competitions. When there was a swimming competition yesterday, they swam in the Seine River. Now, immediately after climbing out of the river, at least one of the athletes started vomiting profusely. Okay, it's been pretty well known that they've been having to watch for the safety of the swimmers because of the pollution levels in the Seine. Now, one of these chief pollutants happens to be human fecal matter, and I will go on to that here in a few seconds. I want to get on first is how this was handled. So this morning, a famous YouTuber that I follow, Salty Cracker had posted a video talking about the athlete vomiting and talking about what the contaminants were and everything else. 26 minutes later, it was taken down by YouTube. And the argument was that it infringed upon the copyright of the Olympics, that it was copyrighted, it was property of the Olympics. He only showed a couple-second clip of the swimming and of the gentleman vomiting. But you're not allowed to see that. Now, we're memory holing it. We're removing it. We're removing it from public domain. If you didn't see it, it didn't happen. If you didn't see it, it didn't happen. There's no way to prove it. I almost guarantee you, if you try to put the same video on Facebook or any of the other major media social media platforms, it'll be pulled down under copyright. Now, fortunately, there's Rumble. Salty Cracker has a Rumble channel, and his video still exists because Rumble doesn't bow and kowtow and isn't pushing an agenda to hide everything. So you can actually go right now over to Rumble, look up Salty Cracker, and you can find his video. It has a guy vomiting, and I think the title of the video is "This Is Not Fine." He's putting it up there. But it's amazing, especially with the Olympics, what all they're hiding. Now, for me being in France for a week, as we walked around, we could clearly see that Paris was not ready for the Olympics. Absolutely wasn't ready for the Olympics. Nothing was completed. And many of the Parisians were very, very pissed off and upset that all this construction was going in and around their monuments, their historical sites. In fact, we used to laugh when we were there that everything we wanted to see in Paris was either broken or closed. A lot of things were closed, and it's interesting now to watch the Olympics because I understand the reason we couldn't get into Concordia, which is the plaza where a lot of the beheadings took place during the French Revolution, is simply because they were building a skateboard park there. That's where the skateboarding competitions are taking part. But in order to protest, a lot of the Parisians were shitting in the Seine. We first found out is my mother-in-law, who doesn't live in the United States. She lives in another country, in the former Soviet Union. She told us before, as we were going, don't swim in the Seine. I didn't think anything about it. I talked to another acquaintance of mine who lives in Russia, and he told me, don't swim in the Seine. And I said, well, that's funny because my wife's mother-in-law mentions the same thing. And he sent me an article about how people were crapping in the river to protest, and also a large number of their immigrants who came from North Africa and the Middle East and other places in Africa routinely shit in the river because that's what they do where they're from. These people are not assimilating to the European way of life. They're simply doing what they know. Hey, there's a river, let's shit and piss in it. And that has risen the levels, or raised the levels of the contaminants, which are mostly fecal matter in the Seine. With all this pollution, there were triathlon practices last week or over the weekend that were canceled because the pollution contamination level of E. coli and other harmful bacteria was just too high. Now, this just isn't something small. I remember 2014, the Russians held the Olympics, and there was so much shit in the media about how the Olympic Village wasn't ready, this wasn't up to snuff. People were pissed off about how this was shoddy work and that was shoddy work. And it was all over the media. Everywhere it was all over the media. Now there are little reports out there, but they're getting very little attention about how Olympic athletes are checking out of the Olympic Village and going to hotels and motels on their own because they don't want to live in the Olympic Village. It is not up to Western standards. Now, a little caveat, I don't know if some of these athletes are just extremely spoiled and entitled and think they're too good for the living conditions. I don't know. I don't know if that was the case in 2014 in Sochi. Another example of how things get shut up is we made a huge deal about how during the opening ceremonies of the 2014 Sochi Olympics, there was one part where they had these mechanical snowflakes that would open into the Olympic rings. Well, one of the rings did not open. Now, on Russian TV, they did, when they realized that wasn't opening, they supplanted and put a coverage of the rings opening from a practice. So lo and behold, during the opening ceremonies in France, the military raised the Olympic flag upside down. The Olympic rings were oriented upside down. They quickly cut away from it, and in France, guess what? They saw the flag flying as it did 2 nights before in a practice. So that's a lot of the same shit, but nobody's talking about it. Nobody's raising a big fit about it. Now, I will tell you this much. During the closing ceremonies, the Russians made fun of themselves. They were recreating the opening with the snowflakes, but they were doing it with skaters. And after all the other skaters opened out of their snowflakes into the circle, one hesitated for a minute just to poke fun at themselves. Let's see if the French managed to poke fun at any of their other nonsense. Also, I will tell you that the Olympics were very dark. The opening ceremony was very, very dark. You've got Marie Antoinette with her severed head. And the only good thing about that is I like the music. It was metal music during that. That happens to be my preferred type of music that was playing during that. Then you've got the fourth horseman of the apocalypse delivering the Olympic flag to the grand opening. So the flag has to be raised and the cauldron has to be lit. But all these things nobody's talking about. And it's really, really, the whole Olympics is taking on a very, very bad place. What's supposed to be a game where we get together and we have these games and it's supposed to promote peace is actually bullshit. There's nothing promoting peace about it. The Olympics has always been political. If you go back and check the early history, after World War I, Germany, Austria, and Hungary were not allowed to participate in the Olympic Games. They weren't. They were banned, just like Russia. There were also other bans immediately after World War II. Germany was not allowed to participate. Really not a whole lot else until we had a fit about, when I say we, I mean the United States had a fit about the Soviets invading Afghanistan. You ever heard of Afghanistan? You ever heard about Afghanistan? A little country out somewhere in the mountains, over near Uzbekistan. You ever heard of that place? We had a fit because there was a problem with extreme fundamental Islamic terrorists on the Soviet border, and the Soviet troops went in, and a few years later they left. And we supported the Islamists. Let's not forget that during that war. And we got so upset about it that we boycotted, decided not to go to the 1980 Olympics that were in Moscow. We decided we weren't going, and that was after the big victory at Lake Placid in 1980 when we beat the Soviet hockey team, which there have been movies made about. The Olympics has always been political, and now we're going to ban Russia because we don't like what Russia is doing in Ukraine. Yet, guess what? Israel gets to show up. Israel's doing some pretty horrific shit to civilians too. I'm actually neutral on the whole Israel thing. I see both sides of the issue. But what I'm trying to say is what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If Russia needs to be banned because of what's going on in Ukraine, then perhaps what's going on in Gaza should have been enough to drop the Israelis. Just food for thought. Who gets to pick and choose? I thought these were about peace. You know, I keep hearing that shit. This is all about peace. All about peace. I don't see any peace. I see political moves. I will tell you this much. I saw, when I was in Normandy, I saw the French police being mobilized like an army, blocking off square miles of the French coastline because they were so worried that something was going to happen to Macron or Biden or Zelensky, who was there begging, because any opportunity to beg for Ukraine, he's going to. So what happened to all this peace? What happened to all this? If we're talking about world peace, why do we want to take the opening ceremony and allow it to be so divisive? You're talking about inclusion. We've got to include all the transgenders. We need to include all the alternate lifestyle. I don't know that anybody was kicking those folks out of the picture. And a little hint, if you want to be inclusive, if you want to be included, then don't go ramming your lifestyle down everybody's throats, so to speak. I don't believe anybody's hunting you down and beating you. I don't believe anybody's really pissed off at you, but you keep ramming that shit down your throats, and you keep going on world TV and exposing your testicles and all that happiness. It's going to piss some people off. It's going to piss some people off. You know, this is simply like a lot of other things that are happening. Once you want to start ramming certain ideas or concepts down everybody's throat, suddenly people say, hey, you know what? I don't fucking agree with that. I don't want to deal with it. And that's what we're having with the backlash from the Olympics. I will tell you guys this much from traveling. I really believe that COVID did a number on a lot of people. We decided, a lot of people, certain segments of the people decided they were going to trust whatever the government had to say for whatever reason. And they trusted them. And I do believe that all that fucking psychological trauma for some people, being locked in, locked home, not having money, and people investing money in businesses that had to fold because of that. I believe that trauma has fucked a lot of people in the head, and they're willing to believe anything. And for the rest of us who have jobs and work, we don't get to see all the stupidity. We don't get to see a guy doing perverted things during the opening ceremonies. We don't get to see swimmers vomit because they've been exposed to E. coli or fecal matter in the Seine River during the Olympics. The rest of us don't get to see that because it's removed off social media. It's blocked. It's the same with the Ukraine war. For years, people have been raising this fallacy that there are no neo-Nazis in Ukraine. There are a large faction of neo-Nazis in Ukraine. Why don't you post pictures on Facebook with Ukrainians proudly displaying the swastika and throwing the stiff-arm fascist salute? Why do you not do that? You don't do that because they will take it down and ban you for glorifying Nazism. You're not glorifying Nazism. You're trying to raise the social consciousness of your fellow Americans or fellow people wherever you're at, that yes, indeed, there are neo-Nazis in Ukraine, but they don't want anybody to know they're neo-Nazis in Ukraine. It's dangerous for you to know there's neo-Nazis in Ukraine. If if you know there's neo-Nazis in Ukraine, you're not going to want to spend $160 billion of your tax money on Ukraine. You're not going to want to be cold in the winter because you're not getting cheap energy from Russia if you live in Europe. Because, well, Ukraine, got to do it for Ukraine. Got to defend Ukrainian values. Got to defend Western European values. NATO, got to defend those European values, the European way of life. If the European life, if their way of life was what we saw during the Olympic ceremonies, that don't need defending. That don't need defending at all. Not with my money, it don't. Not with my effort. Nope. Not with any of that. And those of you who know me, know what I do for a living, you know Tactard Ted is not a peace creep. You know I'm kind of warmongerish. I'm not anti-war, I'm anti-Ukraine war. I put that out there entirely. I don't have a problem with the other things we have done in the United States. I don't have a problem with us going into Iraq. I don't have a problem with us going into Afghanistan. What I do have a problem with is just like the people who decided to mock Christianity, then run from the fact they've mocked Christianity. I really have a big disdain or distaste when we go halfway around the world to invade a country because we don't like the way they're acting. And then when Russia invades its neighbor because it's destabilizing the region, we seem to have a fucking fit. You know, we used to hear, not in my backyard, not in my backyard. Look, that's Russia's backyard, it's not ours. And in case you folks haven't been paying attention, Russian ships are visiting Cuba a lot nowadays. And I made this point recurrently, we lost our shit because the Soviet Union placed a bunch of missiles in Cuba. If we're not careful, there are going to be missiles, hypersonics, that we won't be able to shoot down, that we won't have any defense that works against, in Cuba, pointed at our happy asses. And not just Cuba, but also Venezuela. Maduro is not happy. We're not happy with Maduro. That's not going to work right. We're not happy with China. China's not happy with us. Personally, I don't like the Chinese. But we've driven the Chinese and the Russians together. We are driving all these people who hate us. This is what 4 years of the Biden administration's failed foreign policy have done for us. We've got all the people who possibly have a grudge against us. We've got them pissed off, worked up, and we have them working together. The Nazis did that. They got everybody who possibly didn't like the Nazis worked up, pissed off together, and in 4 years, after everybody got pissed off, Nazi Germany was done. Is that what we want for us? Is this what we want for NATO? I think we need to be adults and do diplomacy. And if you want to condemn somebody else for something you've done, you're a hypocrite. I'm an American. It doesn't mean I have to be a hypocrite. It's not required you be a hypocrite. It's not required anybody be a hypocrite. We should be steadfast in the love of our country. We should be steadfast in treating others the way we want to be treated. We're blessed in America. I ain't gonna lie. We're blessed. But we're watching our freedom slip away. We're letting the government get away with a lot of shit, and we're letting the media get away with a lot of shit. You know, the biggest lie is the lie of omission, and putting all this stuff down a memory hole, deleting it from public record, not allowing it to be out there because it either A, violates Olympic copyright, or that's showing nudity, or that's glorifying Nazism when you're just simply trying to say, hey, look, they're a bunch of fucking Nazis. This shit's not fucking right. It doesn't give you a proper perspective. It doesn't let you see what it is. You know, this is that Facebook fact-checking shit. We're going to fact-check it. A good example is, as there's a meme of Macron swimming in the Seine with trash and garbage around him, and you know, clearly Photoshop, clearly a meme, clearly nothing real. And I got fact-checked, said it was fake. Well, no shit, it's fake. It's a meme. It's supposed to be satirical. And for another thing, the Seine does not flow directly underneath the Eiffel Tower. In this photo, that flowed directly underneath the Eiffel Tower. So I think anybody who has half a fucking brain would understand that that's not a real fucking picture. But we're not allowed to have satire. that questions the narrative. That's just kind of the way it works. Well, folks, that's all I got time for today. I'm actually got to do a few things. Got to keep the wife happy. Got to keep the family happy. Listen, you guys have a good weekend. I get a little chance, maybe I'll talk to you a little bit more down the road. Take care. Bye.